Britain stands on the brink of a constitutional earthquake. Just 1 minute ago, the nation's top judge has called for an emergency meeting with King Charles III, an extraordinary and unprecedented move that has left Westminster shaken to its core. This is no routine legal consultation, no symbolic gesture of protocol. This is a desperate alarm bell sounded at the highest level of power just days before Prime Minister Keir Starmer faces the UK-EU summit. Behind the closed doors of Buckingham Palace, secrets are being whispered, warnings are being delivered, and the future of the United Kingdom itself may be on the line. Why has the judiciary bypassed Parliament and gone directly to the monarch? What danger is so grave that the King himself has been summoned into the heart of this political storm? The answers lie in a hidden struggle over sovereignty, betrayal, and the quiet dismantling of Brexit. The emergency call to King Charles III did not come lightly. Britain's top judge, a figure whose duty is to remain impartial and removed from political battles, has taken an action so unusual that it has stunned legal experts and political insiders alike. This decision signals not a disagreement over policy, but a looming crisis that could redefine the constitutional fabric of the nation. At the centre of this storm is Prime Minister Keir Starmer, whose upcoming appearance at the UK-EU summit has triggered fears that a secretive plan is underway, one designed to quietly reverse key elements of Brexit, undoing the will of the people without open debate or consent. For years, Brexit was sold as the moment Britain reclaimed its independence, restoring its borders, reclaiming its laws, and freeing itself from the shadow of Brussels. Millions voted with that promise in mind, believing the European Court of Justice, free movement, and EU-led defence schemes would be consigned to history. But now, whispers from within Whitehall tell a very different story. Insiders describe secret talks, back-channel agreements, and hidden policy drafts that would tether Britain once again to the very institutions it fought to leave. The alarm raised by the top judge suggests that these whispers are no longer speculation. They are fast becoming reality. At the heart of the judiciary's concern is the possible reinstatement of the European Court of Justice. After the 2016 referendum, voters were promised that this foreign court would no longer have any authority over Britain's domestic law. Yet evidence suggests Starmer's government is preparing to allow the ECJ back in through a back door, framing it as a necessary step for smoother trade and diplomatic cooperation. To critics, this is nothing less than a betrayal. It hands power back to Brussels and strips away the hard-won sovereignty that Brexit was meant to guarantee. But the ECJ is only one piece of a much larger puzzle. Another proposal at the centre of this crisis is the so-called Youth Mobility Scheme. Marketed as an opportunity for young Europeans to live, study and work in the UK, it appears harmless on the surface, yet critics warn this scheme could be a Trojan horse reintroducing elements of free movement and opening the door for broader immigration changes. By quietly targeting the younger population, the government could lay the foundations for a reversal of one of Brexit's most decisive victories, the end of uncontrolled migration. And this move comes at a moment when Labour's popularity is faltering in areas where Euroscepticism is strongest, raising questions about whether the government is deliberately ignoring the voice of its voters. The stakes climb even higher when defence is brought into the picture. Recent comments by Defence Secretary John Healey have revealed plans for the UK to contribute funding and manpower to EU-led defence initiatives. Critics argue that this would tie Britain's military independence to Brussels, limiting its ability to make autonomous decisions on matters of war, security and intelligence. Surveillance networks, artificial intelligence programs and joint strategic planning are all said to be on the table, measures that could fundamentally shift the balance of power away from London and towards Brussels. For a nation that prides itself on the strength of its armed forces, the implications are alarming. This is why the judiciary has acted. The top judge's unprecedented decision to summon the monarch is a signal of last resort. It is a recognition that conventional checks and balances may not be enough to stop what is happening. King Charles, constitutionally bound to remain neutral, cannot intervene directly in politics, but the symbolism of his involvement cannot be underestimated. To involve the monarch is to tell the nation and the world that Britain's constitutional integrity itself is under threat. The corridors of Westminster are filled with unease. MPs whisper about betrayal, insiders speak of a constitutional time bomb, and ordinary citizens are left in the dark, unaware of the scale of what is unfolding behind closed doors. This is not politics as usual. This is not a normal negotiation. This is a battle over sovereignty, democracy, and the very future of the United Kingdom. The emergency meeting between the judge and the king is not just a ceremonial event. It is a flashing red light, a warning that Britain is being steered into dangerous waters without the consent of its people. The countdown to the UK-EU summit has begun, and with every passing hour, the question grows louder. Will Britain's sovereignty be protected or surrendered, piece by piece, in secret deals far from public view? As the nation holds its breath, whispers from behind the closed doors of Westminster grow louder. Sources close to the judiciary have described the emergency meeting with King Charles as extraordinary and without precedent. To call upon the monarch is not a casual step. It is a signal that Britain is facing a constitutional crisis of the highest order. Legal experts are alarmed because such an action implies that the machinery of democracy is failing, and that normal parliamentary checks are no longer enough to contain what is unfolding. For decades, Britain has prided itself on its parliamentary sovereignty, its independent judiciary, and the balance of powers that protect the people from overreach. Yet now all three appear to be under strain as Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government moves forward with plans shrouded in secrecy. At the heart of the tension is the looming UK-EU summit just days away. Analysts warn that this meeting is not simply about trade or diplomacy. It could be the turning point where Britain quietly concedes its independence. Senior EU figures, including Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa, are expected to be present. Insiders suggest the agenda includes sensitive issues, trade regulations, judicial oversight and defence integration. Each of these areas carries the potential to tie Britain closer to Brussels. Undoing key promises of Brexit, Starmer's critics accused him of attempting to do by stealth what could never be passed openly through Parliament: rebind Britain to the EU without asking the people for their consent. The European Court of Justice remains the most explosive flashpoint. The British people were told in 2016 that their laws would no longer be subject to foreign judges. Yet Starmer's government, according to reports, is preparing to restore the ECJ's authority in certain disputes with the EU. Framed as a technical measure to facilitate smoother cooperation, this move would in reality hand judicial supremacy back to Brussels. Critics are calling it a betrayal, a direct reversal of the Brexit mandate, and a deliberate attempt to weaken Parliament's sovereignty. Legal scholars warn that once the ECJ regains authority in one area, it could expand into others, leaving Britain once again at the mercy of a court beyond its borders. The youth mobility scheme is another ticking time bomb. Presented as a way to offer young Europeans the chance to work and study in Britain, it has been sold as harmless, even beneficial. But sceptics see it as the thin edge of the wedge, a step towards the reintroduction of free movement, the very policy that Brexit was meant to end. By opening the doors to a younger generation, the government could gradually normalise immigration patterns that reverse the Brexit settlement, fundamentally reshaping the nation's demographics over time, and this is not lost on voters. In regions where Euroscepticism is strongest, Labour's support has already been weakening. Yet instead of adjusting to public concerns, Starmer appears determined to press ahead, deepening the sense of betrayal. The defence dimension adds even more urgency to the crisis. John Healey's statements about funding EU defence initiatives have sparked widespread alarm. These are not minor programmes. They include surveillance sharing, artificial intelligence coordination, and joint military planning. Critics argue that such integration would erode Britain's ability to act independently in matters of war and national security. For centuries, the United Kingdom has prided itself on an armed forces capable of standing on their own. To see elements of that independence surrendered to Brussels is, for many, unthinkable. It is not just a matter of military cooperation, it is about sovereignty, control, and the freedom to make decisions that protect Britain's national interest first. The decision of the judge to involve the monarchy reflects just how grave the situation has become. While King Charles cannot take direct political action, his symbolic role is powerful. To bring the king into the heart of this crisis is to sound a national alarm. It is a signal to Parliament, to the government, and to the people that the foundations of Britain's democracy are at risk. Palace insiders have confirmed that the atmosphere is tense, with advisors recognising the unprecedented weight of the situation. This is not routine protocol. This is a constitutional warning shot. The public, however, remains largely in the dark. Much of what is unfolding has been hidden behind technical language and quiet diplomatic manoeuvres. Legal jargon, complex agreements and closed-door negotiations have kept ordinary citizens from realising the scale of what is being planned. But now, as the summit approaches, the truth is beginning to emerge, and the judge's intervention has ripped away the veil of secrecy. The message is clear. Britain is on the edge of a fundamental transformation, and unless the people act, their sovereignty could be signed away without their knowledge or consent. As this drama intensifies, one question hangs heavy over the nation. Is this the final chapter of Brexit or the beginning of its reversal? The answer lies in what happens in the coming days at the UK-EU summit and in the shadows of Westminster, where the fate of Britain is being quietly decided. The sense of unease across Westminster has turned into open alarm. Behind closed doors, senior officials are speaking in whispers, fearful that the public may soon uncover just how far these secret negotiations have gone. Insiders warn that Starmer's strategy is not about sudden, sweeping changes, but about incremental concessions, small agreements, quiet signatures, subtle commitments that add up to a fundamental shift in Britain's future. It is this method, slow and deliberate, that has prompted the top judge to act. For while the public may not notice a single policy being signed away, the accumulation of these deals threatens to dismantle the Brexit settlement piece by piece until it no longer exists. The looming summit with the EU has now become the focal point of this crisis. On the surface, it will appear to be just another diplomatic meeting. Leaders gathered around polished tables, smiling for the cameras, speaking of partnership and cooperation. But beneath the polished speeches lies an agenda that could redefine Britain's sovereignty. Reports suggest the summit will cover three critical areas: legal oversight, trade regulation, and defence cooperation. Each of these areas is loaded with constitutional danger. Legal oversight means opening the door once more to the European Court of Justice. Trade regulation means accepting Brussels rules over British businesses. Defence cooperation means placing aspects of the UK's security under shared EU control. To critics, this is nothing less than a slow-motion surrender of independence. The judiciary's decision to involve King Charles underscores just how serious these risks have become. In modern times, it is unheard of for a judge to escalate matters to the monarch. Yet this unprecedented step has been taken because Britain's traditional safeguards may be failing. Parliament is distracted, the public is kept in the dark, and the government presses forward in secrecy. The king, though unable to intervene directly, now stands as a symbolic guardian of sovereignty, a warning signal that the balance of power is tipping dangerously out of line. For ordinary citizens, the implications are profound. If the European Court of Justice is restored, Britain's own courts could once again find themselves powerless against rulings from a foreign body. Businesses could be forced to comply with regulations decided not in London, but in Brussels. And if defence integration goes forward, decisions about war, security and intelligence could be shaped by EU leaders, limiting Britain's freedom to act alone. Each of these outcomes undermines the promise of Brexit, the very promise that Britain would once again be in control of its own destiny. The youth mobility scheme, too, is quietly reshaping the debate. While sold as an opportunity for cultural exchange, critics see it as a calculated move to reintroduce free movement under another name. By focusing on younger demographics, the government may hope to normalise immigration flows and soften public resistance. But in communities that voted overwhelmingly for Brexit, this scheme is viewed as a betrayal. It feeds into the growing suspicion that the government is not listening to the people, but instead pursuing its own hidden agenda. Inside Labour, the tension is rising. Dissenting MPs are beginning to speak out, warning that Starmer's strategy risks alienating the very voters who gave him power. They fear the backlash from communities that feel betrayed and abandoned. Yet Starmer seems determined, pressing forward despite the growing alarm both inside and outside his party. For critics, this determination is proof that the Prime Minister is more concerned with appeasing Brussels than respecting the mandate of the British people. The streets remain calm for now. Most citizens are unaware of the emergency meeting between the judge and the king. But as the story begins to spread, anger is brewing. Britain's people are proud of their independence, proud of the sovereignty they fought to reclaim. If they come to believe that their leaders are quietly surrendering that sovereignty, the political consequences could be explosive. And this is exactly what Westminster insiders fear, that once the public understands the scale of what is happening, the trust between the people and their government will shatter beyond repair. The countdown continues. With each passing hour, the stakes grow higher. The summit is no longer just a diplomatic event. It is a test of Britain's future. Will the government stand firm on sovereignty, or will it allow Britain to slide back under the shadow of Brussels? The answer will not only define Starmer's legacy, but could also determine the very survival of Britain's constitutional order. As the date of the UK-EU summit draws closer, the pressure inside Westminster has reached boiling point. Reports describe a government pushing forward at full speed, determined to finalise agreements before the public can react. Critics say this is the strategy: move quickly, strike deals quietly, and keep the details buried under diplomatic language. By the time citizens understand what has been signed away, it may already be too late. This is why the emergency meeting between the judge and King Charles is so significant. It is not just a formality, it is a desperate attempt to halt the momentum before Britain's sovereignty is carved apart behind closed doors. Inside Labour, cracks are widening. Senior figures are warning Starmer that the political cost of these secretive moves could be devastating. Party loyalists fear a revolt from within, with backbench MPs already whispering about betrayal. Grassroots activists, many of whom supported Brexit themselves, feel abandoned, accusing the leadership of plotting to undo the will of the people. Yet, despite the rising chorus of dissent, Starmer presses forward. His critics believe this determination proves that his loyalty lies not with the electorate, but with Brussels. To them, the Prime Minister is steering Britain back into the very structures it fought to leave, with little concern for the democratic mandate that removed the nation from EU control in the first place. The judiciary's warning to the monarch is being read by insiders as the final safety catch, a way to shine a light on what has been hidden in the shadows. But even this extraordinary step may not be enough to stop the momentum. The government is framing its actions as pragmatic, speaking of stability, growth and international partnership. These words sound reassuring, but behind them lies the quiet reintroduction of Brussels' influence. Legal scholars are clear: once the European Court of Justice regains authority in any capacity, Britain's courts will once again be subject to a foreign power. Once EU rules govern trade, British businesses will once again answer to regulations written outside their borders. And once defence cooperation is cemented, Britain's armed forces will find their independence compromised, forced to coordinate with Brussels before acting. The youth mobility scheme, though less publicised, may carry consequences just as serious. By opening Britain's doors to young Europeans, it is being sold as a cultural exchange. But insiders fear it will normalise a form of free movement that Brexit decisively ended. Once the scheme is in place, it could expand, slowly reshaping immigration policies and reversing one of Brexit's central promises. For communities already feeling ignored and betrayed, this could be the breaking point, a sign that their vote no longer matters, that the government they elected is not listening. Palace insiders report that the King is deeply aware of the gravity of the situation. While bound by constitutional neutrality, the monarch understands the symbolism of his involvement. To have been summoned by the top judge is to acknowledge that Britain is entering uncharted waters. This is not about politics alone, it is about the survival of the constitutional framework itself. The monarchy, though powerless to legislate, stands as a symbol of continuity and sovereignty. By bringing the king into the conversation, the judiciary is sending a message. Britain's future is at stake. The wider public is only beginning to sense the scale of what is happening. Headlines are starting to leak details of the emergency meeting, fueling speculation and unease. Citizens are asking questions. Why now? Why involve the king? What is being hidden from the public eye? Each question deepens the suspicion that something is gravely wrong. The government insists there is nothing unusual, that Britain's relationship with Europe is simply being modernised. But for many, this language only confirms their fears that Brexit is being undone quietly, step by step, deal by deal. As the summit approaches, the atmosphere in Westminster is electric with tension. Ministers pace the corridors, aides whisper behind closed doors, and MPs brace themselves for the fallout. The judge's intervention has raised the stakes to a level unseen in modern British history. For the first time in decades, the judiciary, the monarchy and the government are caught in the same storm, their roles colliding under the weight of an unprecedented crisis. Britain stands on a knife's edge, and the next move could determine whether the nation retains its sovereignty or slips back under the influence it fought to escape. The question that haunts every conversation now is simple but chilling. Has Brexit already been undone in secret, and will the summit merely reveal what has already been decided?